This is a Lenovo ThinkCentre M73, a business class desktop computer from 2015. Or, I guess I should be more specific. This is the ThinkCentre M73 Tiny. That appears to be its actual name. They definitely aren't lying. I mean, look at this thing. It's tiny. And here it is compared to a standard 3.5-inch hard drive. And this is an entire computer. I actually had to weigh this one. It weighs just under 3 pounds or just over 1 kilogram. That's lighter than a lot of the laptops I've covered on this channel. Now I have to be totally honest. This thing kind of was an accidental find. You see, my mother wanted a cheap, thin client computer for a specific purpose in our house, and while I was out to dinner one night, this M73 was one of the first things that appeared in a quick eBay search. I took a brief look at the listing, did a quick search of the CPU, and thought, yeah, that'll do. So I went into this one not really knowing what to expect, but I was pleasantly surprised because unlike a lot of thin client PCs you can buy on the cheap, this M73 contains an actually somewhat real CPU, the Intel Core i5-4590T, making it a lot stronger in the performance department than some of the other options I saw. As for other specs, this, unsurprisingly, has integrated Intel HD 4600 graphics. It would have also had 4GB of DDR3 RAM, a 500GB hard drive, a built-in wireless card, and probably either Windows 7 or 8.1, although my particular unit was manufactured in August of 2015, so in theory it could have been a very early Windows 10 computer, but I don't think that was the case here. Either way, that upgrade would have been free. The old website marketing for this one is about what you would expect. Basically, this computer is small and has performance. Like with other business class machines, this would have had lots of different customization options. The base model started at $375. However, my unit here appears to be a pre-configured version, priced at $605 after savings. There isn't really much else to say. I mean, ignoring its size, it's a ThinkCentre, and it looks like one. It pretty much has the exact same design as my M79, and I'm pretty sure there would have been an M73 small form factor that used the same case. I should point out though, if you haven't already noticed, the Tiny is mirrored in its layout compared to the small form factor. Of course, this thing can be placed in either a vertical or horizontal position, but in my opinion, it looks better sitting horizontally. And it even has rubber feet for this. There's basically nothing else of note on the top or bottom or the sides of this machine, except there would have been an Intel processor sticker on the top cover. There's the usual ThinkCentre serial number sticker, a couple of vent holes on the front, and the bottom has the Lenovo information sticker that has things like the manufacture date, the Windows sticker, and the power requirements for this machine. That's right, this thing is powered by effectively a laptop power supply, one that's capable of 20 volts. But I mean, can you blame it? The front of this machine has the power button, 4 LEDs for power, hard drive activity, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth, 2 USB 3.0 ports, with one serving as a powered charging port, microphone and headphone jacks, and some ventilation. The back of the computer has more ventilation for the heatsink, the aforementioned power port, a DisplayPort connector, 2 USB 2.0 ports, a VGA port and a serial port, another USB 2.0 port, a spot for a wireless antenna, a Kensington lock slot, and the security screw that holds the top cover in place. So with that, let's seamlessly shift to this computer's internals. The front panel is part of the top cover on this one. It's all just one assembly, but I think that makes sense here. Otherwise, the two most immediately obvious things would be the 2.5-inch hard drive that I still can't believe fits in here, and the heatsink and fan for the CPU. Now attached to the heatsink assembly is a tiny little built-in speaker, as is typical for ThinkCentres. The hard drive assembly, meanwhile, is screwed in with just 2 screws, and there is an internal Wi-Fi antenna attached to it, so extra care may have to be taken while dealing with this. Underneath the hard drive is the RAM slots, where this machine can take up to 16GB of SODIMM RAM, although this one was only equipped with a single 4GB stick. Also next to that is the slot for the wireless card and the spot for the CMOS battery. Removing the fan reveals what I assume is this machine's Intel H81 chipset, with no heatsink on it or anything. Next to that is an empty spot on the board where an M-SATA port could have been, but that isn't equipped on this version. And of course, under that heatsink is a full-size LGA 1150 socket with that aforementioned 4590T CPU. I will say, I think it's remarkable what they managed to stuff in such a small enclosure. And it's more standard than you might expect. I mean, you could still upgrade this processor to an i7, cut down one, though other than the one free RAM slot, there isn't any further room for expansion. This board is so compact, this serial port isn't even directly attached to the board. Despite its appearance, despite how dense it is, I think this is honestly a pretty easy computer to work on, if nothing else because it's just so small, there's so little to it. Honestly, not bad. This machine's BIOS is a typical one you would expect for a ThinkCentre, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. This machine shipped with a BIOS revision from May of 2015. The latest is from January of 2022. It has various I/O and CPU settings you would expect, and as typical for a Lenovo, it also has some fan control settings. Me being me, I set this machine to better thermal performance, although the default is acoustic performance. And there is plenty of security settings, and this BIOS also has built-in diagnostics. As for the operating system, I don't have that, unfortunately, as the original hard drive understandably had to be wiped. To make a long story short, I went with Kubuntu this time around since I just needed something quick and easy, and there wasn't any recovery media available for this, and this is only going to be a temporary setup anyway. This computer was preloaded with a fresh install of Windows 10, but on mechanical hard drive, it's unsurprisingly pretty slow. However, what I haven't mentioned up until now is that this computer's original hard drive is actually a 7200 RPM drive rather than the typical 5400 RPM. So with Kubuntu on it, it's not nearly as bad as it could be. It takes a little while to get this thing going, but once it's booted up, it's not too bad. Most applications don't take long to open. Even with 4 gigs of RAM, this computer is still perfectly capable of multitasking. But of course, it has its moments. When that drive gets saturated, like for example, if there's a lot of updates or something, or particularly when browsing the web sometimes, it does still get pretty slow. So I did find an extra 4 gig stick of RAM to boost this to 8 gigs of RAM, and more importantly, I swapped out that hard drive for a basic 120GB Kingston SSD. I didn't notice this beforehand, but the hard drive caddy has these little rubber bits by the screws, probably to help with vibration dampening. This SATA data/power combo cable thing definitely seems a bit fragile. The wires are quite thin, and it's not really that flexible. You can see it's kind of bending the PCB on the drive a little bit. But anyway, with the SSD installed and with it running Linux, this thing soars. This thing is really snappy, and it did not feel at all like a computer that's now more than 10 years old. For the rest of the video, this is the config that I'll use. This 4590T is definitely old, but it still seems to keep up pretty well, likely thanks to it being a quad-core CPU. If this were the dual-core version, the 4570T, I think it would be a pretty different story. Probably the most intensive thing this computer will do is play YouTube videos, and this was able to play my 1080p 60 video with absolutely no issue at all. This thing wasn't even breaking a sweat. Normally in these videos, I like to test gaming on these machines, but unfortunately, many of my usual suspects, and even some new ones too, just refuse to work on this setup. Even stuff that normally works on Linux just didn't. On paper, this computer should be able to do at least basic gaming, but I think perhaps the combination of inadequate drivers plus stuff just not wanting to work on Linux means this was difficult. But not totally impossible, because I was able to get a couple things to work. And I'm sure I could probably figure out what's going on and get games to work, but to be honest, I don't really care, because, I mean, come on. This thing was obviously never meant to be a gaming PC. It has no possibility for dedicated graphics, so the experience was already going to be limited at best. It's just not what it was meant for or built to do. But, like with many other integrated chipsets, the HD 4600 can play basic or older games at lower settings. And this is where the RAM and storage upgrades were extremely useful. So it's time for some Cinebench, and for that, I'm gonna have to switch over to a temporary Windows setup. Fun side note, this thing's motherboard is apparently codenamed Shark Bay. That sounds pretty cool. I started in Cinebench R15 since it was the closest one I had. Unsurprisingly, the i5 4590T lost out to the also cut down i5 4460S, thanks to the latter having a higher clock speed and just being a little bit beefier. But it wasn't that far behind, and it also trounced the AMD A8 7600B in the M79. In a computer that is a fraction of the M79 size. I wanted to run a much newer version of Cinebench for science, but unfortunately neither the 2024 or 2026 versions wanted to work on this computer, possibly due to this machine just using whatever basic drivers Windows Update installed. The newest version I could get working was R23, where it was much of the same story, being a bit behind the 4460S, but still far ahead of the 7600B. Now this next part is a little interesting. It's thermals time. This machine is using just about the largest physically possible heatsink that can fit in this chassis, and this is purely an exhaust only setup, as there isn't really anywhere for this blower fan to bring air in. This computer has vents on the front, but I put my hand up to it several times and I can't actually feel any air being pulled through these vents. This machine definitely runs a little on the warm side. Even with the fan controller set to the better thermals option, it idles usually around 45 degrees, if not a little higher. Doing something more CPU intensive, like playing the 1080p 60 video from earlier, saw this thing run at over 55 degrees, and if multitasking while doing that, it can easily exceed 60. Now that's not amazing, but it's also not totally awful. It's not throttling or anything. After several hours of benchmarking, and also when I was trying to game on it, this thing peaked at just over 70 degrees. For this thing's size and its performance, and for what this thing will be doing, I think it's acceptable enough. But depending on what it's doing, I definitely would want to monitor those temperatures, and I'd also want to make sure that that vent is not obstructed or clogged up with crap at all, because that's basically the only way to get air out of this chassis at all. Of course, running it without the cover helped drop temperatures, suggesting the case could use more ventilation, but to be honest, if you're buying a computer like this, there's a good chance you already know and don't care, or are going to put it in a place where having vents on the sides would just be completely useless. Now, even with this fan controller set to better thermals, this machine is pretty much silent in normal operation. If you're in a quiet environment and sitting directly next to the computer, you can hear a little bit of fan noise. But in a room like mine with other things going in the background, you really can't hear it at all. And this is with it running at around 1700 RPM. I found this computer seems to have a hard threshold of about 70 degrees before it seriously kicks up the fan speed. I've recorded that being as high as 4000 RPM when that happens, so it can get noisy if that CPU is really being used, but of course, it can always be louder. Now, one last thing with this fan, I did notice it does produce a slight draggy noise that's noticeable primarily when the cover is removed, probably from the bearings if I had to guess. I also should point out, I actually have two of these computers at the moment, and they exhibit the same behavior, so it's probably just how it is. Speaking of noise, we might as well talk about that speaker, which is so tiny, it's barely loud enough for the system sounds. I mean, it's about what I expected. Very tinny, and in my case, very blown out. Not sure I'd say it's better than nothing, because even at max volume, it's basically not really usable at all other than maybe a really quiet environment. This thing would just be far better served with an external speaker setup over DisplayPort or something. Last few things, the original hard drive in this computer is overall unexciting. It's a Seagate laptop hard drive, although as mentioned previously this is a 7200 RPM drive, so it's not total trash. In fact, I'm probably going to keep it and use it in something else, but of course it still loses out to the SSD I installed. And it does also make a little more noise than you would expect since it's running at a faster speed, and it can run a little warm at times. Again, swapping to an SSD helped solve both of these. Finally, the Wi-Fi card in this machine is alright. It's an Intel card, the 7260 NGW. I'm pretty sure it has Bluetooth built in, which is nice, but as it's only a wireless N card, it can be a little limited by modern standards, but it's still perfectly usable. And that is with an antenna connected to the back. With just the single internal one, it's unsurprisingly a lot more unpredictable and definitely slower. So that's about it for this one. There's weirdly not much else to say about it. The biggest thing going for this computer is that it's not big. I mean, it's just a relatively good computer. It's built pretty well, it works pretty well. I still think it's a fascinating piece of engineering, and I went into this pretty much blind, but I have to say I was pleasantly surprised with this thing. I don't really have any major complaints or anything, especially for the price, which I suppose I should reveal. This computer was only $40. The performance of this machine with the i5 seems really good, and with some cheap upgrades it basically feels about the same as my regular devices, and in fact honestly, this thing feels faster than my workbench computer I use to record parts of this video. I guess my biggest concern is thermals. I mean, that was my biggest concern going into this. They're not amazing at times, but again, considering this machine's size and the fact that it at least has some performance in exchange for that heat, and it doesn't seem to be totally overheating, I think I'll give it a pass this time. Ignoring its size though, it's just a good, solid little machine. It still seems perfectly capable in pretty much every aspect other than graphics performance. And since it's a business class machine, it's got lots of support for it, and there appear to be quite a bit of them out there, including some for pretty cheap. At the right price, I don't think it's a bad option at all, especially compared to a lot of the other options in this size class.